What's the Hold Up Pod? It's Dan again, and here I am, all by myself. And why is that? It's because I'm a fucking unorganized dumbass, and we're gonna open this episode with me talking a little bit about what I want to get out of this pod, the existential threat that I myself pose to this pod, and then I have a small rant, maybe 20, 30 minutes, just some examples of something that falls into what's the holdup from sports movies about sports injuries. So let's start with, well, why am I, myself, the existential threat to this podcast? And it's because, you all might remember, last week I had Mike on. He was a lovely guest. He did a great job. We had a pretty interesting conversation about rounders. I think the guest format makes for a more interesting podcast unless you're really, really experienced this and very good at what you do. So me by myself is less likely to generate an audience, less likely to go to interesting content, interesting discussions. And yet here I am, by myself. And you may say to yourself, well, Dan, is that because no one was interested when you made the open call for people to come on and talk about different things? And no, y'all are awesome. You were really interested. I've had a lot of different people express interest and come up with ideas. I have several DMs. I have a Word document with a bunch of different subjects in it. I've got folks from Blue Sky who want to talk about movies like Krull. I have people who want to talk about their relationships with bands from when they were younger and now those bands are on tour again. I've had some general thoughts as I think about this show. I've even had some people who are relatively big name podcasters themselves say, sure, I will do this. And did I get any of those people organized last week to record a fucking episode and come on here and do something interesting where we talk about this? Of course I did not. That did not happen because it was left up to me. And I let work and life and a bunch of other just pointless excuses get in front of the fact that I didn't coordinate that. So this is me sitting here giving you a mea culpa and a little bit of an open heart moment to let you know what I'm worried about in terms of this not working. And I'll talk about that for a second because I was involved, nowhere all that big, in the last big media revolution, which was blogging. In the early aughts, I had a blog. It was called What's the Good Word? I wrote about Georgia Tech stuff. I had some people who found it enjoyable. God, I'm still not going to edit that out. I've had people who thought it was enjoyable. I got to know some other bloggers out there who are people that you still see on Blue Sky. And yet, eventually that faded after about 2 years. And why did it fade? Because I couldn't be organized, because I couldn't stay consistent, because I let my day job get in the way. And I'll admit, writing does not come as easily to me as this. I have made most of my career in being some kind of salesperson, somebody who could be in front of people and pitch things, somebody who's very, very comfortable with speaking extemporaneously about subjects that he finds interesting or knows something about. So I think and hope that podcasts will work better for me because I can sit down and I can hit that little record button and I can come put my dumbass voice in your ears with thoughts. And so I'm going to pivot off of self-flagellation and trying to, mine some sympathy from y'all into, here we are. This is episode, good Lord. It's a Monday. This is episode 3. It's my 5th recording. We've had a couple of subjects. I've had one guest. I have other guests who are interested, and by God, I'm going to make sure going forward that I make that happen. And I want to spend a moment before I get into my what's the hold-up kind of topic discussing where I think I want this show to really go. And I said this to Mike last week. I think I might have actually said it on the pod as we were prepping for this, right? When I first started thinking about this, when I first started imagining this show, and I've been imagining it for a couple of years now, and I finally just said, let's make it happen. I'm like, I'll have another movie review podcast. I will sit here and I will do, what's the holdup? We're going to review classic movies from when I was a kid. I kind of had a conceit to it where, for example, somebody who's interested in doing the show, Jamie Howard, she mentioned doing the movie Spice World. I've never seen Spice World. So I thought that would be fun because it's my first viewing, right? I enjoy the YouTube reactors who react to a movie they'd never seen before that I've seen. That is content I absolutely enjoy. But I was hopeful that I could talk to people, different generation from me, different stages in their life from me, even if we're the same age, about movies that mean something to them. So that was the original thought of it. But as I started talking about, whether I was talking about Bloodsport or I was talking about Survivor Series, or really the one where I dove in and spoke about Vision Quest, it made me realize that I think what I'm in this show more interested in talking about is our relationship with art from different points in our lives. And I've said that before, right? But you caught a little bit of it last week with Mike and I, where we were talking about, we're of a similar age. So Rounders was a college movie, and like that general experience around having a college movie. Sorry, somebody just messaged me. I am doing this in the middle of the day on a Monday, so I got distracted for a second. That experience of having a college movie, why it mattered to us, maybe why it was captured in the zeitgeist. I don't need this to be a history podcast. I don't need this to be super serious. But as a guy who sits at home alone with his thoughts a lot, and I think about why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, or I'm thinking the way I'm thinking, or I'm behaving the way I'm behaving, I think things like art, like movies and music and works of art and video games and books and all of those types of things tell us a lot about ourselves and where we are in life. Tell us a lot about how those items are reflections of what was going on in the culture, what was going on in our lives, the intersections of those types of things. And I think as I sit and look forward to this show and some things that I have pitched to some people that they seem to be interested in talking about, I think it's really going to shape where we go with the show and hopefully the depths of conversations. I'm really excited, hopefully in a few weeks, to record a discussion with somebody who's going to go see Oasis again, since they were kind of a tween or a teenager again. And I'm just excited about that, right? And to revisit that thing and to see if it still matters to you. I think music, of course, can be a little more timeless than film or literature. But still, why do things matter to us? What's interesting about that? Why did it speak to us so much? And that's why I look forward to going into like fantasy and sci-fi movies and books and all of those types of things from when we were kids. Maybe play some old video games a little bit or watch people play the games on YouTube. Once again, this is not like we're going to go in depth. I'm going to have a ton of categories. We're going to talk through stuff. There will be a structure that I think forms out of this as we get some reps, just like kind of doing a sales presentation or discovery call. Sorry for using business terms. Whatever goes on in your life where you're like, look, we start to get some muscle memory. We know how this goes. We'll talk about those things. Maybe someday Spencer and I chat about what 40K meant to me when I was 17 years old, or Magic the Gathering, whatever, right? And reach out to me on Blue Sky. Jacket Dan, Blue Sky app. If you got anything you want to talk about, you want to talk about playing 2nd edition D&D, let's talk about that shit. I really want to use this as what are the things that we either did enjoy or still enjoy? Why do we? How did that reflect on us? How does it reflect on us now as we've grown and changed and we continue to go forward in life? That's what I would love to get out of this. Now, that being said, I am still going to put together a somewhat brief what's the holdup rant here. I think my rant in this instance. Will probably only be about 10 minutes. This is going to end up being kind of a mini-sode, and that's okay. That's okay. I'm going to record it. I'm going to release it. I'm going to at least keep that going, and I'm going to stop fucking up the guests. But my rant, and this kind of came up because Kyle Banduho, Big Screen Sports, I was catching up on that the other week, and they did Varsity Blues. And Varsity Blues features one of my absolute favorite things that happens from films really in the 90s. And I think this was stuff that happens... this was something that happens because you were still dealing with a lot of writers who were not necessarily big fans of their subject matter, right? They're especially studio production type stuff. So you're looking at the program, you're looking at Varsity Blues. Blue Chips, that's an excellent movie, by the way. It's probably one I ought to revisit as part of this show, just because I really, really loved that movie, and I'm curious how it holds up. But this had it. I'm trying to think of something else. There was another movie I had in my mind where it came up, and it is this notion, even in the early to mid 90s, that it pops up in a lot of movies about, once again, podcast, visual medium, so you can't see it. I'm doing quotation fingers. Career-ending injuries in sports movies. And how often they love to have somebody blow a knee. It's also never explained what happened, right? Lance Harbor lost his scholarship to Florida State. Lance Harbor goes to Florida State. They get him some real non-backwoods Texas rehab, and he probably wins a national title. And once again, I'm going to give a shout out. You should listen to the Varsity Blues episode with Kyle and Alex McDaniel and Caroline Darney, because it's really fun. And Alex had never seen the movie. Like, it was kind of triggered with me because it was exactly a perfect example of what I'm hoping this could be at some point in time, which is someone who had never seen a movie is watching kind of this cultural artifact film, and they determined they enjoyed it, right? Very much a product of the 90s. That was Varsity Blues for me. Was a very strong college movie. Came out in 98, I think. I was like a junior in college. We all watched the hell out of it. But, and I know they actually earned it a little bit more in Varsity Blues. Let's take the program, right? I actually wanted them to call it the Alvin Mack Film Injury Award that apparently ends a career for no real good reason, because Alvin Mack in the program suffers one knee injury and is apparently goes from being arguably the best middle linebacker in the whole fucking country to never playing football because of one knee injury. And I get it. Even in 1992, they had ACL reconstruction. There was like, you could put a leg back together. The farm boy in Blue Chips, they make this whole point. He suffers a knee injury. He doesn't play college. What did he fucking do? Did his whole leg fall off? Like, drives me nuts. And this is the point of Kyle's podcast, originally how it was formed, all the shit they get wrong. But it drives me nuts. The number of guys who suffer some kind of injury in a sports movie, and it's supposed to be career ending. Even when it was in an era, it was like, they fixed a lot of this stuff. Like, these guys, they fixed things. Like, what I loved about the original Major League is, God, why am I forgetting his name? I'm going to look it up. Tom Berenger's character, Major League. I can hear all of you shouting it at me right now, and I cannot remember the name of his character. Jake Taylor, of course, right before I get to it. They're perfect, right? Jake Taylor has terrible knees. He's probably had knee injuries. He was a catcher back in the era before they gave you better equipment and stances and all the other stuff to do it. But that's the guy who's playing. I'm sure he had knee injuries. I'm sure he tore shit up. Bad labrums, other things that happen. He's still out there playing. But this trope that exists in sports films of the idea of career-ending injury, and that they exist, right? These things do exist, but really, more often than not, something that's career injury ending is not an injury, right? It is something like some kind of congenital problem, really always sad. You can find these a lot of times in college football, right? Or even guys about to go into the NFL, and they faint at practice one day. Turns out they have a congenital heart defect. They really should stop playing football because they could die on the field. That's career ending. Sometimes something really, really bad happens, where it's not just an ACL. It's not to be too gross, but a whole bunch of things get torn. Things are pointing in the wrong direction. That is a career-ending injury. But, so it's always funny because it's one of the things that kills. Let's come back to the name of the pod, even though this isn't fully the theme. What's the holdup of a lot of sports movies falls apart a bit because of the fact that they get this aspect of the sport wrong. And it always screams to me that then the movie got written by people who were not necessarily fans of the sport. And I do think that's something that's changed lately. It doesn't have to be sports. It can be genre films. I think part of the reason horror movies held up as long as they did is they were almost always written by people who were fans, right? There's never kind of a studio writer. I shouldn't say never. Never's a huge word. But it's rare in my mind to think that there's, other than maybe when it was blowing up there for a bit, that there's a studio sitting over here going, we got a bunch of staff writers and what they're going to crank out is horror movies, right? It just doesn't seem to happen, right? They'd put those guys back in the day when you could do like an $8 million comedy that would, make $50 million. A lost art form, by the way. But you never had that. But for whatever reason, right, they knew, get the staff writers together, throw them out. Let's come up with sort of a concept for a movie. Oh, another one. Footsteps Falco. Like Shane Falco, right? He had one bad game. I think he got injured. Or not even Shane Falco. It was Johnny Utah. That was the other one I was thinking of. Not even a sports movie, but the trope, right? Johnny Utah, the original Point Break. He's playing something. Says something along the lines about how his knee got bent like 45 degrees in the wrong direction. He missed his window. What the fuck do you mean missed his window? If the guy is like supposed to be an Orange Bowl winning quarterback, they are salivating that his rookie contract gets to be smaller because they can slap injury prone on him and then bring him up. So to me, that's one of the things that lots of movies get wrong that kills the holdup for me. And to loop it back to, since Varsity Blues was a little bit of the subject for this, that I do feel like they at least earned was the notion that like Lance had several injuries and he was taking Toradol and other things so that he could get through them. So maybe that helped him earn a little bit of, yes, he can. He's so injured he can't play anymore. But even then, he wasn't so injured that he could not function. He was just in a lot of pain. And yes, there's a lot of scar tissue in there and whatever else. But like, he's going to go to FSU. They're going to send him up. Columbus shout out. They're going to send him up to the Houston Clinic in Columbus. He is going to get himself cleaned up. And he's going to play for FSU. Because, like, Steffi Graf blew her Achilles tendon and then still went and won a bunch more majors. And I know that happened because a kid I went to school with's father is who repaired her Achilles tendon. So, like, you can recover from so much. So, I apologize for not having a guest. I appreciate any of y'all who stay with me. If my already small listener numbers drop down just a little bit more because I was not disciplined this week, I fully understand. I am going to get disciplined. I am going to make sure that I plan on having a guest, or I plan on having more subjects beyond me just sitting and ranting for 20 minutes about something. But I am excited about this show, and maybe that'll be kind of my earnest closing. I'm enjoying this, even when I'm sitting here by myself, ranting about injuries in sports movies or talking about what I want. This place, this little spot where I'm having a chance to voice opinions about things that don't matter, but in a way matter a lot, because the arts and the creative outlets that we identify with and what they mean to us tells us a lot about who we are. And they can also tell us a lot about who we were. And they can tell us a lot about where we need to go. And even the stupid things you get fired up about, like the fact that I just ranted about a pointless thing. Whether or not they do a good job with injuries in sports movies is like ultimately not going to give people housing. It's not going to end a humanitarian crisis. And I get that these things are not important, capital I. But at the same time, they matter to me as a person, and they matter to who I am, and therefore it does matter. And therefore it is important. And therefore it is worth analysis, especially if you can use that analysis to come up with an understanding of yourself and where you're going and a worldview that you used to possess, still possess, and need to adapt. And so I'll close this with that is really what I hope this show will be. I got some neat ideas for some episodes in the next coming weeks. I've got some movies I'm excited to revisit. And I really hope you stick with me and are patient with me as we do this. And I thank you all for the few of you who have subscribed and listened. What's the Hold Up Pod? You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. If you can't get it wherever you get your podcasts, let me know because it's not that hard to register it, and I'll go do those things. Next week, I will make sure I have a guest. I appreciate all of you for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.